All right. Hello and good afternoon, arts advocates, and welcome to Americans for the Arts and the Arts Action Fund's office hours with our arts advocacy team. My name is Morgan Fernari, manager at the Arts Action Fund. I am a 28-year-old white woman with freckles and shoulder-length auburn hair. I'm wearing a collared button-up navy and tan patterned shirt and sitting in my home in Miami, Florida, with some turquoise artwork behind me. Americans for the Arts is committed to accessibility, and this includes our speakers offering visual descriptions of themselves, which makes the webinar more accessible for audience members that are blind or have low vision. Additionally, there are Zoom-generated closed captions for audience members. You can access this closed captions by selecting the CC button in your Zoom toolbar. This webinar also includes live American Sign Language interpretation, which you can access by clicking on the globe icon in the Zoom toolbar and select ASL interpretation. We welcome our interpreters, Linda and Melissa, and thank them for their help today. We want you to ask your questions today, all right? We have a great program ahead and we want to know what you have to say and what questions you want answered. So you have access to the Q&A feature, which is also located in the Zoom toolbar. That way you can ask our speakers questions throughout the webinar and they'll be able to message you back, and same with our arts advocacy team. We will do our best to answer all questions either by responding through the Q&A feature or aloud during the allotted Q&A segment of the webinar. This webinar is also being recorded and will be available for you to watch and share in the next week. You will also be able to find additional resources on our office hours landing page, and the link is going to be shared in the chat right now. In the event that we don't answer all of your questions, please reach out to Americans for the Arts Public Policy Manager Olivia Tarpley so we can keep in touch. And her email was on screen, and I'm sure it will be shared in the chat momentarily. Today's session will include a legislative update from Nina Azutunjali, Executive Director of the Arts Action Fund and Chief Counsel of Government Affairs at Americans for the Arts, followed by two panels. The first panel will be moderated by Tushar Swain, Director of Public Policy at Americans for the Arts, and include three arts leaders who attended our July 14th and 15th legislative fly-in in Washington, D.C. The second panel will be led and moderated by Nina Azutunjali, who I introduced before, and include arts leaders from our July 21st through 22nd legislative fly-in. After that, we'll have the Q&A session live with all of our arts advocates and panelists. And at the end, I'll be back to share some additional information about how you can take action during the upcoming August congressional recess, when members of Congress will be back in district, back in your home states. So first, I'm going to just introduce our AFTA staff speakers. So of course, you already know Nina Azutunjali, who I introduced before, Tushar Swain, who I introduced before, and myself, Morgan Fernari. But we also have some wonderful people behind the scenes, so thank you so much for your help as well. On our first panel, we'll have Annie DiMartino, Executive Director at the Utah Cultural Alliance. We'll have Rosalie Gilbert, Manager of Arts and Events Services for the City of Mansfield, Texas Municipal Government, and Tony Manfredi, who's the Executive Director of the Nevada Arts Council. And on our second panel, we'll have Ben Brown, board member at Alaska State Council on the Arts. We'll have Nadie Hess, communications and grants manager at Omaha Conservatory of Music, and Lance Nielsen, executive director of Nebraskans for the Arts. Thank you all so much, panelists, for being here. We're so looking forward to it. So I want to thank you all, and please welcome Nina Azutunjali to give her legislative update for us all.
Thank you, Morgan. And I'm trying to get my video on. There we go. Hello and good afternoon for those of you in the East Coast, and good morning still for those of you in the West Coast. So I'm Nina Azutunjali, and I am a Middle Eastern woman with short black hair and an Arts Vote backdrop behind me that was designed exclusively for the Arts Action Fund by the renowned artist Shepard Fairey. Okay, I'm going to begin with a legislative update. Morgan and I worked late hours last night to get a legislative e-blast out to everyone last night, and we're going to post in the chat a link to it in case you did not get it. And if you did not get it, that means it's stuck in your clutter inbox or you're not a member of the Arts Action Fund, which you can join for free. Um, okay, so to begin this legislative update, I'm going to begin just a little bit earlier in the year so we know where we are in context with what's happened this week. So um, the president submitted his budget for FY26. And just as a reminder to everyone, the federal government operates on a non-calendar year basis. So their fiscal year goes from October 1 until September 30th. So the funds that we're lobbying for now that will begin October 1, 2025 is called FY26 funding. And typically, the budget cycle begins with the president kicking it off with putting a budget proposal to Congress on what he is looking to see get funded in FY26. That does not necessarily mean that Congress has to adopt line by line, number by number, exactly what the president requests. It's a very political process. And then add to that, when a president becomes a new president in their first year, they're provided more leniency in terms of when they submit that first budget because they have a lot that they're trying to get together, get their cabinet members confirmed and things like that. And so this year we didn't get that budget from the president until May. So everything started a little bit later. And as you also know, the bigger priority for the president this year before the appropriations process was getting past the one big beautiful bill, which was primarily a tax bill and certainly some cuts to things like Medicaid and SNAP programs and things like that, but not annual appropriation bills. Those are considered discretionary funding, which have an annual appropriations each year. So we're done with the tax provisions for this year. And as we've reported in a previous webinar, the primary tax provision that we are looking for this year was what's called the universal charitable deduction in order to provide more incentives for charitable giving to those who do not itemize, because in the previous years, there has not been a special line item of how much did you give to charity this year for those who are non-itemizers. And that's about 90% of all taxpayers in the country. So we're done with that, and we're now on to the appropriations process. So the way it works by constitution is that the House begins with the appropriations process, and then the Senate mirrors the process, but just a little bit behind the House because the House is supposed to initiate the appropriations process. So in this case, let me first say that what the president put forward is something that he did exactly the same during the first administration, and that is zeroing out funding for the fiscal year ahead of us for the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. I'm going to focus on those two agencies and maybe a little bit on the Kennedy Center, National Gallery Art, and Smithsonian because they are all part of one of the 12 discretionary appropriation bills called the Interior Appropriations, because the Interior Appropriations is responsible for funding the nation's natural and cultural resources for the country. So in this one Interior Appropriations bill, you have everything from EPA and water funding issues and clean water issues and clean air issues to firefighting provisions for actually, it's now happening throughout the country. It's not limited to just the West. And then you have the cultural resources, and that's where funding for the NEA and NEH come into play. And so on this front, we started off with the House bill. So what happens first is the House Subcommittee on Interior Appropriations, which is chaired by Congressman Mike Simpson of Idaho, Republican of Idaho. Because why Republican? Because the House is controlled by the Republicans, and the Senate also has the majority in the Senate by Republicans. So in both cases, when I refer to the chairs of the House and the Senate committees, they are going to be chaired by a Republican, and then there will be a ranking member, and that means the Democrat, because they are in the minority in both of those chambers. So on the House side, as I mentioned, it's Congressman Mike Simpson, and the ranking Democrat is Shelley Pingree of Maine, who is also the chair of the Congressional Arts Caucus, which is very useful and helpful to us. So what happened on July 15th is that the House came together in subcommittee for the House Interior Appropriations Committee to do what's called their first markup of the Interior FY26 bill. And what a markup is after the subcommittee does a series of hearings, does questions and answers with the various agencies, even if they don't have a separate hearing, they put together a bill of combining what the president's priorities are with what congressional priorities and individual member priorities, and add to that any kind of earmarks called congressionally directed funds into the bill. And they try to fit it into the allocation that they've received for that year. And in this case, the allocation that this House subcommittee received is 6% less than the previous year. So that means cuts are naturally going to happen. Add to that increases in areas that the president wanted to see, that the Republican-controlled House want to accommodate. And with that is how the sausage gets made into one bill that's then presented to all the members of the subcommittee, both Republicans and Democrats, to get what the first mark will be. And that first markup happened on July 15th. And for the last 2 years, the Republicans have had control of the House, and we have seen that there has been a cut to the cultural agencies, but it all gets worked out later on. And we believe we have a very strong, supportive arts leader in Congressman Mike Simpson, who chairs that subcommittee. But we were a little bit surprised this year when there was a 35% cut to the NEA and NEH. And you'll recall that I said the overall allocation cut was 6%. So it was a steeper than normal increase. But what you should know is also the House allocation is smaller than what has typically been happening on the Senate side, where they get a larger allocation. So what you have is a scenario where we were a little bit surprised of what happened. I had a chance to speak with Chairman Simpson after that markup to find out what the scenario is, and he assured me that he thinks that it'll all get worked out as in the previous 2 years, with a higher Senate number that he will accommodate and go with. So we at least I felt a little bit more reassured by that. And so then we move into the following week on Tuesday, July 22nd, 1 week later. That bill goes from subcommittee to full committee. So now it's the full House Appropriations Committee, which has probably 3 times more members sitting on that committee, all coming from the various other subcommittees. So they all kind of have different interests. Around that same time, one day before that markup, we finally got a chance to see the report language that came with that House subcommittee markup. And there we saw even more things that were a little bit disconcerting, where there was play happening on what the typical allocation is for state and regional arts agencies. That was even to the surprise of state arts agencies and regional arts organizations, um, where it was a significant higher number with a very specific amount, which was 72 million for both the state arts agencies and regionals and the state humanities councils within the state humanities. There were also some statements made by the chairman that seemed more off than usual during that full committee markup. So I had a chance to go and meet with the chairman again the following day, and was able to clear up some of those misunderstandings and make it clear that Americans for the Arts is not in support of changing the statutory formula that has been going on for probably over 20 years now of what the formula is to states. So we put that on record. But the committee markup had already happened, so that was something to follow up on in a future day. But somewhere where we could make a difference is on the Senate side, which simultaneously, so that committee markup happened on July 22nd, and on the House side, and on July 24th, the Senate was marking up the Interior Appropriations Committee. So the day after I had a chance to meet with Chairman Simpson, we were now meeting with Senator Murkowski, and we're going to go more into detail with that in our panel because we have the individual who helped make that happen with Senator Murkowski on the panel today. But what I can tell you is that we made it clear that this was not good to make these changes without having discussions, without having a hearing, without talking about the impact and whether states could even make the match of any kind of an increase and what it would mean for organizations that apply directly to the NEA and want that opportunity to have a direct grant from the NEA. So we received two kinds of reassurances from who is the chair of the Senate Interior, which is Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and who is a member of the Senate Cultural Caucus. And the chair of that full committee is Senator of the full Appropriations Committee is Senator Collins of Maine, who is the chair of the Senate Cultural Caucus. So we're in good shape here in terms of the leadership of these appropriation committees, caring a lot about the arts and the humanities. So what we received as a reassurance is that the markup in the Senate the following day was going to be significantly higher than what the House put in, and that the language that the House had put in their report language was likely not to appear on the Senate side. And what I can now report to you, because this happened yesterday, so this is real timely information, is that the Senate put in 207 million. So imagine the House is at 135, the Senate put in 207, which is exactly the amount that they have currently at the NEA and NEH. So in a year when there are mass cuts to federal agencies and some complete zeroing out, getting level funding is quite significant. And it has a lot to do with the many thousands of arts and humanities advocates who did lobbying throughout the year, and especially, I have to say, with our fly-in advocates who did it in the last 2 weeks. So with that, I am going to pause on this legislative update. You'll have an opportunity to ask me more questions when we have the larger Q&A at the end, so stay tuned. And I'm going to pass it on to Tushar Swain, who is going to talk with the first group of fly-in advocates that focus primarily on the House side. Take it away, Tushar.
Thank you, Nina, and hello, everybody. I'm Tushar Swain, Director of Public Policy at Americans for the Arts. I am a middle-aged man with brown skin and a bald head. Today, I am wearing a navy blue polo shirt and black rimmed glasses and have white walls and artwork behind me. As Nina said, we kind of had a double header of fly-ins, July 14th and 15th, and then July 21st and 22nd. The 14th and 15th focused on House Interior Republicans, and I'm very excited to have some of those folks who joined us. Annie DiMartino, Executive Director of the Utah Cultural Alliance, Rosalie Gilbert, Manager of Arts and Events Services at the City of Mansfield, and Tony Manfredi, Executive Director of the Nevada Arts Council. Thanks all for joining us. If I could invite you to all give a quick physical description of yourselves, then maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, as well as the organizations that you represent. So let me start with Annie. Hi, Annie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Annie DiMartino. I am a white woman in my mid-40s with shoulder-length brown hair and black-rimmed glasses. I am wearing a black shirt, and I am reporting live from my home office in Lehi, Utah, and I am utilizing a blurred background basically to erase some of the chaos that is behind me. I am the executive director for the Utah Cultural Alliance, and we provide communications, stewardship, and advocacy support and resources for the arts, culture, and humanities sector in our state. And I flew out to chiefly meet with Representative Celeste Malloy, who represents our 2nd district.
Thank you so much for joining us then and joining us to tell about your experience now. Rosalie, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosalie Gilbert. I am the Manager of Arts and Event Services for the City of Mansfield, which is in Texas in the Metroplex. Sorry, I forgot my description. I am a white woman nearing 40 with short brown hair and a ever-growing gray streak in the front. I am wearing a black and white patterned shirt, and I am recording live from my office in Mansfield, Texas, with my window behind me and the blinds drawn so that you can see me and not just a blur of sun. As I said, I am our Manager of Arts and Events Services for Mansfield. I oversee all of our arts programming, which includes a historic theater, a historic home, which is an art gallery space and studio space, our large city festivals, and other arts classes and programs. I came out to see my congressional representative here from Mansfield, Jake Elzy.
Thank you, Rosalie. And last, certainly not least, Tony Manfredi, Executive Director of Nevada Arts Council. Why don't you give us a physical description, a little bit of background about yourself, and your organization and who you came to see?
Thanks, Tushar. Hi, everyone. Tony Manfredi. I'm a middle-aged white male of Italian heritage with graying brown hair and a beard. I'm wearing a yellow t-shirt today and joining you from Incline Village in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. And I have a pine tree and a condo in my background. As Tushar said, I'm the executive director of the Nevada Arts Council, the state arts agency that serves the state. I came out to meet with Congressman Mark Amodei of CD2. I also happen to be a practicing artist in my own time and have extensive background in marketing, communication, and previous experience working for the PBS station in Reno.
Thanks, Tony, and thank you all again for joining us. Annie, let me start off the first question for you. Why did you decide to come to Washington, D.C. to advocate with AFTA for National Endowment for the Arts funding?
Yeah, I think my answer to that question is very short and sweet. I flew out to DC because this is so much more than a district issue or a state issue. This is a national issue that requires our unified voice and attention. And as I am just about ready to kickstart a statewide tour, that has been part of my big messaging, is that we need to be speaking with one collective voice. And I was happy to lend my voice to this fly-in 2 weeks ago.
Thanks, Annie. Rosalie, how about you? And maybe a little bit more specifically, like how has NEA and other public funding been helpful to your local community?
Sure, I certainly second everything Annie has said. Specifically for Mansfield, we have a current NEA grant that we're very happy has not been canceled yet. But we will be spending the vast majority of our funding in FY26. And so there's certainly concern on a very local level that that funding would disappear if there was no funding or greatly reduced funding. But we also have worked with our state arts agency, and those funds are a direct trickle down from the NEA to our state, to our cities and local arts organizations. And so seeing something like that dry up, not only in this upcoming fiscal year, but for the future, would be extremely detrimental, not only for Mansfield, but for communities across our country.
And Tony, you gave some great information to your members of Congress, talking a little bit about the economic impact of the arts as well as the NEA in your states. Do you want to touch upon that a little bit?
Sure. So we, as with the State Arts Agency, we receive a partnership agreement through the NEA, and it's this year it's $1 million, a little over $1 million. So really significant. Permeates all the way through our budget. There's some staffing, there's some operational support, and ultimately, the biggest part is through our grant funding and program work that we provide. What we've pulled together is information from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis data that highlights the arts are over a $12 billion industry. You know, the total arts package is over a $12 billion industry in Nevada. We also utilize some of the AEP6 data that we worked and collaborated with AFTA on gathering and collecting, and from our nonprofit sector, and certainly those are the organizations that we support directly. That's over $668 million of economic activity. Our state legislature provides data that arts, recreation, and entertainment are the #1 job producer in the state. So certainly highlighting that. And then most importantly is just the return on investment of our work that we do just as the State Arts Agency. We have some grant data collected from 23 through 25 that highlights about $4.9 million of grant funding, impacts and engages with over 4.5 million people within the state. And the return on that investment is about $280 million, and that's cash into the state. So really highlighting that, and Congressman Amodei was really intrigued by that information and that data for sure.
He really was, and I'm gonna come back to you in just a moment with your meeting itself, but I wanted to actually just bring all of you into the next question. Meetings with congressional offices have been increasingly harder to get. Mainly because of the volume of meeting requests. We aren't the only sector in town that has had the threat to cuts, as well as some of the chaos on the administration side. So my question is, just tactically, how did you go about securing your meetings? What tips do you have for those trying to do the same? And then maybe just to expand that question a little bit more, you all were able to at least secure some time directly with your members, all in slightly different ways. And so I wanted you all to maybe touch upon that as well. Annie, let's start with you.
Yeah, I started off very politely. I sent my emails, I went through the scheduler, I requested time specifically to speak about NEA and NEH funding. I outlined what the purpose of our meeting was going to be, and what the art and culture sector contributes to the state, and specifically to Congresswoman Malloy's district. I was thrilled when I was able to get on the calendar with her staff. but I am a little bit pushy. Specifically, if I have flown all the way out to DC, I want to be able to meet with them face to face. So I did attend the markup meeting, and I was able to meet with the Congresswoman on her way out of that meeting, which allowed me to put myself in front of her for a brief 2-minute time period where I was able to say I was one of her constituents. I was able to outline the number of organizations that I represent and the number of people and artists that I represent. And I was thrilled when she offered me one-on-one time later on in that day. So that is how I went about meeting with her and her staff, all in a 24-hour period.
Great. Rosalie, how about you?
Annie sounds like she was maybe very polite the whole way. I think I maybe was a little bit of a pest. I started out by emailing, and then when I didn't really get responses that were committed to a time, I emailed again, and then I maybe made a phone call, maybe twice. And so I did eventually, it was the afternoon before when I finally secured a meeting with Congressman Elzey's staff. And then we were able to attend the markup meeting, as Annie said, and I stood outside the door right before that meeting started. And I'm very grateful that my congressman has a very distinct bald head. And so I was able to snag him because I could pick him out of the crowd coming in. And I was able to speak with him for about a minute. And so I was grateful that my voice was the last he heard, advocating for the arts and for the NEA before he walked into that meeting, and so that he understood that his district was receiving direct funding from the NEA, and a significant reduction would directly impact his constituents.
And Annie, you kind of had a similar development, right, in getting some time with Representative Malloy.
Yes, because I had it on the books that I was meeting with her staff that afternoon, and I was able to meet with her one-on-one an hour later. So she asked me to come back to have some FaceTime, which was fantastic.
So you were the two of you are the best kind of pests, because it all worked out and you got some much needed FaceTime, which is really the most direct way to make your case. Tony, how about you?
Well, first and foremost, the language and information that you all provided in, kind of the sample language, was really helpful just as a starting point. And same thing, sent messages. Interestingly, I sent directly to, again, you all were able to provide some information to some key players on that, and that was helpful rather than going through their portal. I ended up going through the portal on a couple of our senators as well, just to put some information in there. But the information and detail that you all provided was a really great starting point. I'd also have to say that I've created relationships with the congressman over the past. I met with him when I was at the PBS station in the past. He's been in office for a while. He has certainly there's some connections, personal connections that we were able to establish over some period of time. He's also on our America 250 Commission, the chair of our America 250 Commission, which happens to be something that the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs, the agency that I'm in within the state of Nevada, is managing. And so I was able to utilize that information to just provide him an update as well. I shared that in the information. The previous engagement that we had with the congressman in March, I was there for another fly-in. I think that helped also just establish a better rapport with him and understanding. And yeah, so it worked. I think, one other thing that was really helpful. We have there are those in the arts portfolio in district. So from both the Senate and House side, and those relationships are really important too. I reached out to those folks to let them know I was requesting the meeting. And so they were able to push and prod in a couple ways as well, especially from the Senate side. So creating that really good, strong relationship with those that are in district, near and around you within that arts portfolio was also really important.
Thanks, Tony. Annie, what did I actually should go to all three of you on this. So you directly met with your members advocating for the NEA and specifically $207 million. House Republicans on the Interior Committee. How did they respond to you, Annie?
To our request?
Yes.
I believe that they all responded favorably to the request. I think they're all a supporter of the arts. One of the interesting topics that was discussed within our meetings, particularly when it was brought up within her staff, not necessarily with the Congresswoman herself, was a question of how will they respond to their conservative constituents? And it was an interesting way in which they framed this question, because it was kind of left in an ellipses limbo for me to read between the lines in terms of what they were trying to ask. And it was in that moment that I realized that this really was a topic that requires the delineation of content versus connection. And I think once we made that delineation clear, they understood it a little bit more. Because regarding NEA and NEH funding, it's so much more than the shows that are being produced on our stages. It also has to deal with the ways in which we foster successful intelligence in students in the classroom. It's the ways in which we are preparing them for the workforce. It's how we support arts therapy programs with our military, or boost cognitive function for our lifelong learners as it pertains to art and creativity and aging. And so I think framing it as the sum of its entirety, as opposed to just siloing out different areas, helped them understand the magnitude and the reason why we're really asking for that full amount.
Yeah, and you did a masterful job of making that point, right? That there was a lot of talk about maybe a perception of public arts during the culture wars, and that there are other and that freedom of expression component is still very important to you. However, there are these other aspects of it that you should be able to support, and you did a wonderful job with that. Rosalie, I know you didn't have too much time with Representative LZ, but you still were able to make the case, and how do you think he took it?
Representative LZ seemed receptive. He said that he definitely thought, there were tough decisions to be made with just overall cuts, but he did not think that eliminating our cultural resources from the country was a wise thing to do, or something that was desired by most of the American people, including his constituents. We find frequently in Texas that there needs to be a lot of education around art as a public good, and understanding what that is, and understanding the ways they drive the economy. That's always a big argument for us here. And so really being able to show those numbers, to show that return on investment, so that folks understand it's, as Annie said, not just about one theater production or one piece of public art. It is something that builds communities and drives economies.
Thanks. And Tony, you kind of win the award. You had a House Republican stay with you for about 40 minutes to talk about the arts, as well as a Corporation for Public Broadcasting. What were your general reflections on that meeting?
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic, and I think testament to my counterpart Nettie Oliverio, who was with us. Tushar, you were in the meeting as well, and the congressman engaged with you on a couple questions as well, which I thought was fantastic. It was really good time together. We talked about, again, it was on that return on investment. Congressman Amodei was supportive and stated a number of times that you don't have to sell me on this. You all do great work, but what he really wanted was some data and information to be able to share and highlight to others about, I think, that economic impact, that return on investment. I think too, in terms of his district specifically, he's in the northern part of the state, so the metropolitan area of Reno-Sparks and Washoe County, but the majority of his area is certainly rural, even some frontier areas in the state. So the impact on the loss of funding. He asked us specifically, what are you looking at there? What would that be? And that was, we were talking about the 135 million markup at that point. So 35% reduction, nearly $350,000 for us. Again, would really percolate through the grant giving and program support that we'd be able to provide. And specifically in those rural communities, they don't have the ability to offset some of that fundraising through philanthropy and corporate funding and the like in their area. So we're a large provider of that funding. So that, I think, resonated with him really well. And from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting side, having been in that world, I was overseeing the development and fundraising for the station for about 7.5 years. And for those who are in the 501c3 or nonprofit world, even if you're not the fundraising person or chairing that work, you're always in fundraising. So my entire 12-year time frame there, you're always dealing with fundraising. For the PBS station, as an example, it's about $1.3 million that they just lost in their funding. That is not something that you can just go out and find easily in private or corporate giving. So highlighted that with him as well, just knowing what that boots on the ground work is like, and certainly understanding what that's like for all of our nonprofit organizations. So those were some things that we were able to talk about. He is also a big history buff, and I started with Nevada's actually bringing the Christmas tree this year to the White House. They're pulling it out of a Nevada forest, and that was a fun conversation that took a little longer than we were even thinking. He was really passionate about that. So yeah, just finding those connections of things that really resonate with him, and he drove a lot of that conversation, and we were there to just answer and provide information. So it was a great talk for sure.
Yeah, it really was, and to learn the details of the White House Christmas tree and that whole process was something else. Rosalie, so we actually found out, right? So to go back to where we were, right, to where we are now, we're feeling really good about 207, but we got the word that the House was going to have the 35% cut. I believe the night before we actually went onto the Hill. But I was very much admired your your resilience through it all, where I was actually not happy and maybe panicking a bit about a 35% cut. But the threat of funding cuts for the arts isn't new to you. So can you explain how past advocacy experiences helped you prepare for going onto the Hill to advocate in that environment?
Sure. I think we always have to play the long game. We're frequently having things cut, or people don't understand the value. Even just while I was in DC, we had a contract up in front of our council, which was voted. Actually, they refused to give a vote on it. And every contract, it seems like we bring to council, even though generally our arts budgets compared to, say, a big road repair project or a capital improvement project are really fairly minuscule. It always seems to be the arts that folks are questioning and asking about. And some of that is maybe a lack of understanding on that return of investment and how that's a public good. Some of it is also that folks feel really strongly about the arts, and they like what they like and they want to see what they like, and don't always understand that when you're working for a city or for a nation, there are so many diverse interests, and we have to sometimes vote for what the public has said they want or the public good. And so it just keeps coming back again and again, and then having those personal conversations. So back to what we're doing at home, we've had conversations the last couple of weeks. Our contract is going in front of council again this coming Monday. We fully anticipate that it will be approved this time. But just making sure that, especially if something is voted down or cut, then you're having those conversations of, if this happens, this is the economic hit that will be taken. These are the services that can't be provided if that money isn't there, if these contracts aren't approved, and making sure that they understand the true impact of something like that and coming back again and again.
You certainly should so much poise for sure, and I could talk to you all for like another 20 minutes, but we are at time, so I just want to quickly close with Annie and say and ask. So you've made these important connections to your members of Congress. What are your next steps to continue those relationships?
Absolutely. I immediately invited the Congresswoman to participate in an art summit that we are presenting at in her district. So that allows her to get a visceral understanding of the work we're doing in addition to the quantitative stats. So I mentioned it when I had time with her in the room. I'm following up with emails and with post stats and thank yous. That is the other thing that I am following up with, just to keep the lines of communication open, and not only with her, but with all of the senators that we were able to meet or leave behinds with. That's kind of our strategy moving forward. Give them a chance to be in the room with us, see what we do.
Well, thank you all again. You had the tough task of advocating for the arts in an environment that's not conducive to funding right now. So you all were excellent representatives of the arts community. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Morgan.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. That was a great panel. And just so everyone is aware, those are panelists from our July 14th through 15th fly-in. And now we're going to transition, and I'm going to have Nina Azutunjli come on, and she's going to talk to panelists from our July 21st through 22nd. So just this past week, we were there Monday and Tuesday on the Hill. So you're getting a fresh understanding of what's been going on. So please, Nina, come on down. We have Ben Brown, and we also have Lance Nielsen and Nadie Hess. Thank you.
Great. Welcome, welcome. And just great. And Lance has just joined us too. So I'm going to first ask each of you to introduce yourselves, the organization that you represent, and a self-description for those who may need it. And I'm going to start off with Nadie.
Hi, my name is Nadie Hess. I am the Grants and Communications Manager at the Omaha Conservatory of Music. I am a mid-30s brown-skinned Latina woman with shoulder-length black curly hair, wearing a black square neck tank top. I am seated in my home in Omaha, Nebraska, with a full bookshelf and a gray couch behind me. And Omaha Conservatory of Music is a nonprofit community music school that builds diverse musical community to enrich lives through education and performance. We serve over 2,000 students annually in lessons, classes, and community outreach programs, of which I was advocating on the Hill on behalf of String Sprouts. Our two core values are excellence and access, which guide our curriculum, teaching, engagement, and approaches.
Great, thank you. Lance.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Lance Nielsen. I'm the Executive Director for Nebraskans for the Arts. I'm a 57-year-old white male with short gray hair. I'm wearing kind of a pink, bluish checkered shirt with a navy blue coat, and my background is blurred. That way, if my bulldog pops up, he doesn't steal my thunder here. I'm again the executive director for Nebraskans for the Arts. We are the arts advocacy organization for the state of Nebraska. So we support all arts organizations like the Omaha Conservatory of Music, and so we do stuff at the state level and at the federal level. So.
Thank you, Lance. And Ben.
Well, good morning from Quinkatani. It is still morning here in Alaska, and I'm Ben Brown, and I'm a lifelong Alaskan. I'm in my mid-50s, late 50s. I'm of Northern European ancestry. I have blonde hair, a short beard, and a lime green tie and a lime green jacket because it is summer, although it's not as hot as it was when we were together in Washington earlier this week. I have served as chairman of the Alaska State Council on the Arts since 2007. We are Alaska's state arts agency. I'm actually in my office here at Perseverance Theater, where I'm the development director, in which position I've been for about 6 years. I've been an actor here since the mid-90s. And so in addition to looking at this from the State Arts Agency perspective, Perseverance has received many direct grants from the National Endowment for the Arts over the years. And so obviously this was a very timely and interesting opportunity to be there to advocate for what I think is looking like a positive outcome. So really happy to be here, Nina. Thank you, AFTA team, and good to see you again, Lance and Nady.
Thank you, all of you. So as you saw in the previous panel, they saw their entire delegation, but the focus was that they had House members on the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee that they really want to get meetings with, and they were very successful in doing that. This group was focused on the Senate Interior Appropriation members and the chair themselves. And we're going to focus our conversation on how those meetings went and what your prior experience is in coming to Capitol Hill. So I'm going to start with you, Lance, and then go to you, Nady, after that, to talk about Lance, I know that you have experience as an arts advocacy organization. How much, and primarily with the focus of state legislature, talk to me about your previous experience of interacting with your congressional delegation in Washington, D.C.
I was just in Washington, D.C. in the month of June. So I was there for the National Association for Music Ed Hill Day. That's part of their day. They have some collegiates come. So I'm an adjunct with Doane University. So we had some students go. So it was a great way for me to go. I actually had two sets of meetings. So they really focused on arts education advocacy on their
Different
Hill
committee.
Day. And so I actually set up some extra meetings a couple days before that where I could come in and talk about NEA grants and NEH. And so I've over the time have really built up some great connections. They seem to I know the aides that are there. I've gotten to know the congressmen and the senators very well. And anytime they're back here in the States, I'll try to make some connections with them as well. It's really just being present is so very important, building those relationships over time. So like this time coming in, I'll use Congressman Flood, for example. He was a state senator and actually the chair of or actually speaker of our legislature at that time. And then when he was speaker, he was one of the champions of getting our creative district program in Nebraska. So every time I see him, the first thing that comes out of his mouth is like, "Hey, how's that creative district program going?" And he did that the other day. And I said, "It's going great unless we have these cuts happening with NEA, then that's going to have direct impact." So, you would grab his attention right away that way. So they are supportive of the arts and humanities, and as long as we can keep those relationships going, it really does open the door for us.
It really is a testament of how important state arts advocacy organizations are in every state, because a U.S. senator, a U.S. House representative that is not their first electoral job. They've had previous jobs down the ladder, let's say, whether it was with local elections, with state elections, and you get to know them and develop that relationship so that it's an easier glide into the federal level. And Nady, have you been to Washington to meet with your members of Congress before?
I have not been to Washington. That was my first time. So seeing it all in action and play out was incredibly interesting to me. For one, I'm really thankful that I had Lance around. I mostly relied on him to give me the lay of the land, what we were up against, what previous conversations that he has previously had with any of our representatives. We have had one member of Congress, no, of the Senate, come visit our organization, but that's been it otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And your organization is also an NEA grantee. Can you tell us the history of that and most recently what's happened?
Sure. Our organization has received an NEA grant on behalf of the Strings Sprouts program, which is a low to no cost strings education program that provides classes for children between the ages of 3 and 8. They go to class for 32 weeks of the year and have the instrument given to them for free. They return the instrument after 5 years, but it provides a crucial foundation for arts education at a very young age before they are able to attend any formal schooling of any sort. So that we have received NEA funding for over a decade. So it's been continued funding for our organization. And while over time our budget has grown, the NEA grant has provided crucial funding in terms of like, hey, we are an organization that receives this funding to other grantors, and they see us as someone who is able to keep up a stable funding. When we received a notice of termination in May, we had, luckily, it was towards the end of our programmatic year. So we were able to submit our check request. We're able to receive all the funds. However, we hadn't heard quite yet if we were going to receive funding for the upcoming school year. And that funding provides when I write the grant, that provides crucial artist faculty funding. It provides money to pay for our assistants who are in the classroom with the children. And it also provides any sort of leeway if we need to fix an instrument, if we need to pay for a database. Those are crucial things that we need as it's part of someone's salary that provides an economic driver for our organization so that someone can just have a job.
Mhm.
That's basically.
And this eventually is going to apply to Ben as well, since he shared that he was the development director at Perseverance Theater as well. And that is, for those in the audience who may be afraid of doing advocacy or may sound like it's a very foreign thing, how close are the skills that you have in doing development with advocacy? Do you want to first go, Nady?
Sure, I can go first. I think the most important skill that I used in the advocacy work that I did was impact storytelling. That marries stories of real, actual human connection to data. And that's the biggest thing. When it comes down to like the numbers and the impact, and like you hear of children being able to have the amount of attendance that you've had, we can connect those stories with our senators and say, hey, these are the people that live in your district. This is how it impacts them. If they were to lose this, this happens. And that's a real consequence to a lack of access of arts. There are so many benefits to that too. And we see that throughout Nebraska. We see the benefits of a lot of our students who have been able to receive this level of accolade that provides not just a academic benefit, but it shows in artistic expression that, hey, we have these students that have been able to participate in all-state orchestra for your district and represent it well. That gives us a level of value. It allows us to really hone in on the importance of what we're doing in our home states.
Great. And Ben, why don't you share how those skills are similar?
Well, I'm also an attorney, as you are, Nina. And
Yes.
so
We're born advocates.
that's right. It really comes down to, making your case and tailoring your message to your audience,
Yes.
because people are busy and they don't have a lot of time. So you want to meet people where they are and try to provide information that they care about. It's all good and well to talk about what you care about, but obviously you get much better results. In a courtroom, obviously there are things that are relevant and irrelevant. And if you go too far, the opposing counsel will say, why is he saying that? And you'll be told to stop. but we have to edit ourselves, I think, as arts advocates in the political environment. So I'm really fortunate to have, Alaska's a small state. I'm a lifelong Alaskan. So I know my two senators and my congressman personally, and I've known our senior senator, Senator Murkowski, the longest. So with her, it's even though she could sit there and really talk at length about why the arts matter, and she gets it. You know, she came to the first production of Perseverance's season last season up in Anchorage, Cold Case, for which we had a grant for arts project from the endowment. So she gets it personally, but she's also an incredibly busy person. So for her to have taken the time she did to be with you and me, Nina, and Carrie, the artist who was visiting her office with us last Tuesday afternoon, was really helpful. But we picked what we wanted to talk about and really tried to prioritize. So the way that's analogous to being a development director is, my nonprofit theater needs earned income from ticket sales. We need donations from individual donors. We need foundation grants. We need government grants, and we need business and corporate investment. But I think it's helpful with that mindset to explain to an elected official who might not otherwise know, without that cornerstone of the government support, the rest of it becomes incredibly hard to do. And even within that world of government support, and you heard me articulating this to the best of my ability on Tuesday, we're grateful that we're looking at more stability and functionality at the National Endowment for the Arts than I think any of us may have expected 5-6 months ago.
Yeah.
That directly translates into stability at the State Arts Agency, of which I'm chairman, because we have a partnership agreement. It's 1 year and not 3 years, but that fully funds us from the National Endowment for the Arts. And that is the advocacy tool I can use with my state legislature to make sure that they realize they need to match that dollar for dollar. And one of the things I had to relay to Lisa, to Senator Murkowski, was, ironically, we're looking at more instability at the local level in Juneau, the capital city where I live, and in Anchorage, Alaska's largest city, where we also produce shows. But I want her to know that, because that makes it all the more important that we have that $207 million number, A, and B, we don't want to see that reallocation to 53% that was in the House report and the final product. And I'm optimistic that we won't.
Yeah, you actually had a great example with the matching problem of the challenge, I should say, if it were all of a sudden increased suddenly. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. At first blush, it might seem like, oh, more money for the state arts agencies. That's a good thing. Au contraire, it's not, because especially those of us in so-called red states, we have to get our legislatures to match dollar for dollar every dollar that we're getting from the National Endowment for the Arts. That is a struggle. And I'm sure anyone from a red state on this, on the webinar today knows you need, and so when we're successful at getting a slightly larger endowment grant, we need to go and say, well, thank you for supporting us, but we need $30,000 more. And in tough budgetary times, $30,000 can be a heavy lift to get. If that 50% were to go in, every state, not every state, but many, many states would be immediately undermatched. And we would all have to go to our legislatures and say, sorry, but I need a little bit more, like a Dickensian character with a hat out. And now is not a good time to be doing that. So stability is better than a windfall that upsets the order of things that we're just so glad has just returned. The other upshot, Nina, is that opportunities for direct grants would diminish, if that lower $135 million number to come in, and then the share of it going to the states were to go up from 40 to 53%, there would be far fewer direct grants. Direct grants are not easy to get. Many of the, so I'm going to keep talking. Am I still audible?
Yes, slightly different sound, but audible.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to adjust the volume here. So, but at any rate, we want to make sure that we maintain those direct grant opportunities for arts organizations across the country. And the only way to do that is to ensure that we don't tinker with the percentage funding formula funding at the endowment. AFTA did a great job helping document the extent of the terminations of direct grants that happened earlier this year. And I can just say personally, we had 2 at Perseverance because we'd moved one show from the prior season to this season. So one was for 40, one was for 50. And they were both in theory
$50,000.
Yes, exactly. Really a big cornerstone of a show production budget. But fortunately, we had intimations thanks to your contacts. I try to stay in touch with the folks at the endowment to the best of my ability. We knew this was probably coming down the pike. So not only had we requested and drawn down on the funds, but I had all the reports ready to upload literally the day after the termination notices came out. And so I also chose not to appeal, because why appeal when we got all the money? But now we're moving into a time where offers for the coming year are coming out, and they are coming out. People are being told, yes, you've been approved for another grant for this production that's coming up. So I have been busy since I got back. I only got back late Wednesday, and you know how it is when you get back from being out of town. But I'm going to double back with all the grantees who had grants terminated here in Alaska through our State Arts Council staff, and make sure we get up-to-date, accurate information to Senator Murkowski and her staff, and also to Senator Sullivan and Congressman Begich's staff, because they need to be kept aware in live time about why stability of funding at the endowment is helping their constituents live better lives, have better economies, have better educated students, and all those tangible benefits.
Right. Thank you. Lance, can you share a little bit of the flavor of what those conversations were like, especially with someone like Senator Fisher, who is a member of the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee on the Senate side? While she may not be chair, she has an influence in letting Lisa Murkowski know this is something that her state also wants. Go ahead.
You bet. Yeah, kind of going back to the other panel, I think one of the key things we have to remember when you're in DC, you have to be flexible. So we had a meeting set, it got moved to noon. And then when we went to have our meeting, she was still on the Senate floor. So we actually went to the Senate with her chief of staff. We just met out in that big little ballroom area with a big chandelier on a
Outside the
table.
floor of the
Right?
Senate.
Yeah,
Wow,
you
that's
can
a
even
big deal.
so we had the meeting there, and so we started our conversation. Explained why we were there. Nady did a wonderful job with her storytelling, and I could just tell with Senator Fisher she was really tired. But when Nady got those stories going, she kind of perked up a little bit. And then we did our ask of the level funding, and then it was interesting because. And I said, we're glad we're here and we wanted to get this information to you before your hearing on Thursday. And at that point, she turned to her staffer and said, "Do I have a hearing on Thursday?" And he said, "No, no, that's part of the Labor and Education Committee." And Olivia was with us, and we're both like, "No, no." NEA and NEH is under the Interior and Environment Committee, and you have a hearing on Thursday. And I you kind of when you hear that story, you're probably thinking, "Oh my gosh, why would they not know?" Well, if we put ourselves in their shoes, would we know everything about everything that goes on in the country? So I think this really emphasizes the fact that we're there to advocate and we're there to educate, and that's because there's no way they're going to know all these things. Now, I'm going to be real honest. Senator Fisher voted yes. I'm going to tell you why, because there was some Nebraska earmarks for Nebraska water projects, and that's really why I think she voted yes. But the fact that we were there 2 days before, we had the conversations about NEA, and she is a supporter of the arts and culture, that we know that, when she voted yes, she knows she was also voting for arts and the humanities as well. So I know that she's very well connected. I'm sure, if any of the other people on the committee were to come and talk to her, that if would she have support for this, she would. But again, I think just that story alone tells you why it's so important that we're there on these very key moments. And again, thank you for inviting us, because I think being very strategic with this plan has really helped move the needle in these last couple weeks.
Yeah. And what I always want to also highlight is all of you coming are actually not only influencing the way your members of Congress look at the arts, but you are actually raising the tides for all arts organizations across the country, because you're increasing that funding level, you're securing it so that every state arts agency, every local arts agency, every local arts organization has some of that stable funding coming from the federal level, and that pride in being able to secure a match. Nady, what does it mean in Omaha when you can say you got an NEA grant. You were up against the best of the best in a competitive field by a national jury.
I think specifically for Omaha, it raises the awareness of not just the big cities receive these grants, but also the little ones, and that our art matters here as well. Our arts education also matters. And not we're not on the national stage. Omaha is a very small city compared to the eastern cities, and I think that's why providing funding is so crucial in our areas too, because we don't get the notoriety. But so many of our students still go off and do incredible things and perform in these incredible places like at Carnegie Hall or at the Kennedy Center. Eventually that's way they go to the big stage, but it all begins with establishing a basic foundation. And I think in our area specifically, we have a higher than average philanthropic generosity. There's so many philanthropists in our area. I was just thinking about how Lance had mentioned water. The Doherty Foundation is provides a lot of funding for water resources in Nebraska, but they also provide a lot of arts funding as well. I do believe that a lot of those things are interconnected. And I especially think when our organization receives an NEA grant that shows other philanthropists, hey, we're actually doing something in our area that matters not just on a state level, but to a federal level.
Yeah. And uh, what we hear as misstatements a lot is by those members of Congress who have not had these kinds of wonderful visits from constituents. They'll say things like, well, all the money goes to New York City and Los Angeles or San Francisco. And how important it is when real life people who are constituents, who are voters of that state and of that congressional district can say, well, let me tell you about the story of how it actually does help our community. And Nady, I understand you've also taken your story and let the news stations in your area know about it. Can you tell us how you're expanding what is a congressional interaction into a public media opportunity also? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. On top of the grants manager, as with many nonprofits, we just wear a lot of hats, and communications is one of mine. I have been able to have multiple conversations about NEA funding with our local news outlets, and one actually led to a national news outlet. We had CNN interview us because they were taking the story about NEA funding, about how it doesn't just apply to the organizations on the coast, but it's actually affecting like the Midwest. It's affecting in the Southwest. It's affecting everywhere. Um,
Yes.
for me personally, when it comes to storytelling, not only am I a grants and communications manager, I'm a mom of three cellists who have been benefactors of that program specifically. I showed up. This is what I told all of the centers. I'm showing up not just as a grants and communications manager for the Omaha Conservatory of Music, but as a mom because I care about
Nice.
how it matters to my children and for their futures. And I see the direct impact in my household every single day.
Yeah.
So telling that story and providing that education, not just to our representation, but also to our communities so that they are aware of how not only that our organizations exist, but how they can engage and that they don't have to just, think, oh man, woe is me, this is terrible for our community. Actually, you can tell the stories of what's going on in your community to your representation as well.
Yeah.
And
And thank you. And I want to get a couple more in because Morgan's letting me know my time's soon up and I have two more questions. Lance, you also use social media to help extend your impact, and it got picked up by one of your senators. Can you tell us what you did?
Well, actually I have not used Reels very much. Do the little videos. I learned how to
Really?
do that before I left, right? So I did a little one out by our home office in Omaha before I left on Saturday, just to let everybody know that I was going to be here, encouraging everybody back here in Nebraska while we're there. This is a good time to contact your senators by email and phone call, and then during the course, the day we were on the Hill, hey, we were here. And then after the fact, I did a little recap of what we really kind of learned.
And the key
And
is, I think you're tagging your members of Congress so
you
they
bet.
see it in their feed. So go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah, we're just adding them. And actually, Congressman Bacon, they posted yesterday our pictures when we were there saying, hey, we had a great conversation with the Nebraskans for the Arts and people from Nebraska. So it's those communication connections that are so very important. They see what we're doing, and we're also seeing what they're doing too, and what they're talking about.
Yeah. And then, Ben, just finally with you, I want to say, I want you to just talk about what the uniqueness was of having the Arts Action Fund's artist in resident, Carrie Tillis, present artwork representing why the arts matter in Alaska with you.
Well, it's a wonderful program. And, I have been in Washington with AFTA before, so I got to see her unveil the New Mexico artwork she created 2 years ago. And I didn't know when Alaska was going to be coming up. So I was delighted to hear that was going to happen. I visited with Senator Murkowski in January when I was there on behalf of the City Council of the Arts. I was there with the Creative West fly-in March. And I took a poster for Cold Case Tour at one of those meetings. But to have a print of a bespoke original creation celebrating the arts in Alaska, and Carrie having done such great research, finding arts organizations that she included in that was, it's always good to see Senator Murkowski. I think she's always pretty happy to see me, but it was an extra something special. And that is something that Senator Murkowski will, I am quite certain, have very nicely framed and put in a feature in a prominent place somewhere, probably in her interior office, because she got it. She got it, and she was able to actually look at the images on the painting, the print of the painting, and recognize what they were. Oh, yes, that's the Odessa Theater at Sitka Fine Arts Camp. She recognized the Formline logo for Perseverance Theater with a little spotlight shining on it. So it really personalizes it, and it was a really, I don't know if that was your idea or the whole team at AFTA's, Nina, but it was a brilliant idea. It's obviously a labor of love, but it's an intensive labor of love. And I was really glad to be able to be a part of that.
Great.
But it made this visit with Lisa extra special and memorable. And so well done, and congratulations, and thanks to AFTA for putting that together. I do.
Thank you. I'm going to now hand it over to Morgan to lead us in a Q&A from our audience.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all so much. And thanks for the rapid fire at the end there, Nina. We have so much information to share with you all, and it's just been so great. So I would like all the advocates to please come on camera and be spotlighted. That would be fantastic, because there weren't too many questions, but I also have some questions for you personally. But I'm going to start with the first one from the audience. So they said, sincerely appreciate hearing voices from across the country on the call, and they're pleased with the work we're doing. So as we look regionally or state by state, are there areas that see more support from policymakers for the arts than others? And what can we learn from that, right? So does anyone want to take that on?
I can take a quick first answer. So I'm currently serving as the co-chair of WAN, which is the Western Arts Action Network. Tony Manfredi is one of my colleagues on the WAN panel from Nevada. And I think in the West, there is a lot of interest and support in maintaining public funding for the arts, specifically because of our indigenous populations and the support that our elected officials tend to have for our indigenous populations. There's indigenous populations in every state and jurisdiction in the country, of course, but I know in Alaska, the Alaska Native population and the importance of arts and culture, for which there's not a separate word in most Alaskan Native languages. It's so intertwined with the Tlingit way of life, with the Athabascan way of life, the Inupiat or Yupik way of life. So I think that's something that we in the West see as an additional advocacy point, an additional success story, an additional place of joy we can meet with our elected officials. And I want to thank Creative West, the very high functioning, a regional arts organization for the West, formerly known as WestAF, recently brought on board the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands and American Samoa and Guam, the Pacific jurisdictions. That is action that reflects the need to continue to involve and celebrate our indigenous peoples. So I think that's one thing we have going in the West that we're doing really well. And Tony, I think, might be able to chime in on that, but I would share that.
I will add, just in the Midwest here in the Plains states, we're really working to keep people here, right? Keep our small school communities growing, and the one way we do that is if there's something that keeps them here, and arts and culture will do that. So we kind of really rely on that and on the economic impact.
Perfect. Thank you both so much. I do want to bring up, we got an NEH question in here, and I wanted to highlight that we did actually have a representative from Maine, someone who received an NEH grant, come in for our fly-in and advocate with us. So at Americans for the Arts, especially with all of our lobbying work, we are always advocating for not only the NEA, but also our kind of twin agency of the NEH to be funded at that same level of $207 million each. So I wanted to shout that out. But it does talk about that the NEH advocates were celebrating the $72 million line on their side. Nina, can you highlight anything about that? We always, we routinely talk with our NEH counterparts, and I know you had a conversation, and I know that we're all in a specific understanding, but is there anything you can highlight for that person on that?
Sure. First of all, while the NEA and NEH are twin agencies, they are very different in terms of how they operate, what their requirements are for their. First of all, let's start off with state arts agencies are governmental agencies. State humanities councils are nonprofit organizations. State arts agencies require a governmental match at the state level. State humanities councils do not require that. They do a different kind of cost sharing. So what we do is try to make their funding levels the same, but in terms of the dynamics of how they do their grant making, what kinds of programs they fund, we leave that up to the humanities folks who are the experts. But that $72 million line item, which would have been a 53% allocation to state arts agencies on the NEA side in the House report language, was a no-go for us. But we're not interfering with what it means on the humanities side.
Thank you, Nina, for bringing that up. Also, I would like to personally ask our advocates, when coming in for a fly-in and learning everything that you do learn, I know a lot of you are advocacy veterans. Some of you, it was your first time here. Can I hear both perspectives on now going back to your hometowns, to your home states? What are you taking back from those lessons you learned on Capitol Hill and are sharing with your fellow constituents?
I'll go ahead and chime in a bit. There's been some follow-up actually from the meetings that we've had, requests back for some additional information. But one of the things that I'm really interested in here and kind of seeing is, for example, from our Senate side, they're asking for impact on the current loss, like what this loss would be, what it looks like. And what's striking to me about a lot of this is, I've been using this analogy a lot, is kind of this hurricane relief scenario where this impact has happened to our humanities councils and arts agencies and artists around the loss of some of this funding or potential loss of this funding. And there is some immediate, even say Corporation for Public Broadcasting as well, you see a lot of this with the stations trying to generate revenue now around it. And I think the real difficulty in trying to quantify a little bit of this is that we've seen organizations, for example, because of this hurricane relief mentality, so to speak, is, hey, here's an additional pop of funding. We saw that happen with humanities councils. We've seen it happen with some agencies and organizations in our world, where we're going to be able to shore this up a little bit right now. But the long-term sustainability of that is really what's in question. And I think the messaging that we constantly talk about is that this public funding can't be replaced long term, and the longevity of it. I love Lance talking about um, these small communities and sustaining these small communities, and really what is it that's going to keep people in these small communities. It's that quality of life initiatives, things that the arts are such a great driver of. Ben talking about that with our native cultures as well. And I think the long-term effect of this really can't be quantified at the moment, but we can't forget that we continue to talk about, we've seen this before, where the loss of public dollars just over time isn't sustainable. And I had mentioned that in my conversation about an organization trying to shore up $1.3 million. That's a difficult challenge long term. And I think that is something that we need to really keep talking about and articulating with our representatives for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tony. Anybody else that wants to bring or highlight anything from their experience?
I will say how much I enjoyed being able to attend the hearings, the House. Well, it was just the one hearing on Tuesday, but then of course watching the video recording of the Senate appropriations markup yesterday, the Interior and Related Agencies, and the THUD bill, Transportation and Housing and Urban Development. I didn't watch it live because that would have been 5:30 a.m. Alaska time, but I did the recording of it. And if that's not something you've done as part of your advocacy efforts, our meetings are almost always, except when you're lucky enough to meet in the cloakroom off the Senate floor or something like that, they're in their offices back in their respective office buildings. But going to an actual hearing in a committee room is one more piece of the puzzle that's really eye-opening and worthwhile to do. And those recordings are available. So not that anyone needs anything more to watch in terms of videos, but if you do want to check out the two markups this week, I would recommend, and you can fast forward to the part where your representative or your senator is talking. I think that was a good experience for me, and I've been doing this for decades, but I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And I wanted to highlight something that Ben has talked about, something Tony has talked about, is the idea of consistency, right? If you just keep throwing these kind of hurricane relief idea pots at people, they don't know where it's coming from next. So the idea of consistent funding, it sounds like, oh, of course there would be, but it's not the case for us, right? So advocating also for consistency in our communities, I think that's a really interesting point that I don't know if that's brought up as much. So thank you for highlighting that. Annie, go ahead.
I just want to add one other quick comment, which is flipping the script and stop leading with need and lead with value. I think that has been one of my biggest takeaways that I am really advocating now throughout my statewide tours. We just have to flip that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, advocates. I do have a couple more questions that are more skewed towards NEA and legislative updates. So if you want to stick around, please do. If there are any questions in the chat that you feel you can help answer, I would love that as well. But Nina, I'm looking at you. So a couple of things first. So someone in the chat did say, would I be right to be afraid that whatever funds Congress allocates to the Trump Doge crew, they refuse to release? So can you talk about that?
Yeah. So one of the things Doge has treated these various different cultural agencies all very differently. And a lot of it has to do with whether there was already a Trump appointee at that agency by the time the Doge folks visited. And in those cases where there was not a political appointee, like the NEH and say IMLS, it was much harder hit. And IMLS had the additional problem of having an executive order for its eradication. Whereas at the NEA, there was a political appointee from the get-go. So I don't fear as much that there will be a cut, but I will say, and I allude to this in that e-blast that we sent out last night, and that is that there is coming a brewing by the end of September what is going to happen with the regular appropriations process, because you need a simple majority in the House on the appropriations process, but on the Senate side, to really get something through, because there is the filibuster opportunity, you really need a block of 60 votes to get the appropriations through. Whereas with a rescissions bill, you only need a simple majority on the Senate side. So many Democrats are eyeing at the possibility of really protesting this rescissions process, and what they believe will be many more rescissions happening coming down the pike, both this fiscal year and definitely the next fiscal year, that there might be just a government shutdown to prevent something like this from happening until there is an agreement to prevent that from happening. Now, if that rescissions is still in play as a real possibility, then there might be some concerns for more cuts happening, including at agencies where there is a political appointee. And I'm just going to give you the best example is the Department of Education, where Linda McMahon is the appointed Secretary of Education. Congress wants more money going out to the states for education programs. But she and the president want more cuts. So what's going to happen?
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. I also have a question. Do you have concerns about agency funds at NEA being used for the Garden of Heroes or other pet projects that don't benefit communities? Also, given how many staff have been let go, is there enough staff to deploy grants?
Right. So first of all, the Garden of Heroes. $17 million of current FY25 money has already been moved from the NEA side and set aside on the NEH side to the NEH, because the NEH is going to be the lead agency responsible for the Garden of Heroes. An additional $40 million was allocated in the One Big Beautiful Bill to go towards the Garden of Heroes. And the NEH has already begun the competitive grant-making process of getting applications from sculptors and other groups to create these 250 statues. So will more of that happen? I wouldn't put it past it, but I will tell you one thing. During the Senate markup of the Interior Bill, Senator Reed of Rhode Island, a Democrat, put together an amendment to prevent something like that from happening. In the end, he saw that there was no way it was going to succeed, so he withdrew that amendment, but he's trying to secure something on the back end regarding a little bit more control over the Garden of Heroes project. But it's moving forward, folks, and it's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, I know we're getting towards time, so if everyone can stick around, I have a couple of more questions I'd like to ask Nina before we go into our advocacy piece.
What about
Sorry.
Tushar? Get him in on this.
Well, they're NEA specific, and I know you have the answers.
Okay, got it.
Okay, here we go. So, someone asked, where can those who got notice on an NEA offer get advice for our response and the compliance certification?
Okay, so let me, if the person who posed that question can just add a little bit of information that I need answers to, and that is, I'm assuming by your question that you were originally offered an NEA grant and it was rescinded. And I'm assuming you appealed and have not gotten a response from your appeal. Is that correct?
I think this might be in response to those who got a NEA offer like this week, the ones that were just recently released.
Okay, this week. And so now ask that question again, so I now have that clarity.
Yeah, so where can those who got a notice of an NEA offer get advice for our response and the compliance certification?
Okay, there is on the NEA website an FAQ for the compliance of certification that you should definitely read, and might even provide some relief to maybe some concerns that you might have. or may reinforce what will be required, because there are going to be some requirements that have to be adhered to. In terms of if you're concerned about whether you should actually accept, because when you put in that application, maybe you didn't know about all these things going on, and now there is more clarity about it, and you have issues about accepting it. You definitely want to read that Q&A and the most updated certification, and it is on the NEA website, and I'm glad someone's posting it. Thank you, Olivia. The one thing that I would recommend most mightily is, if you can, is to try to use those funds as quickly as possible, and do not wait until the end of the grant cycle to upload your receipts and complete your final report. Do them all as quickly as possible, so that it may not be an issue of certifications, but if you're worried about issues of clawbacks or anything like that, which I am not as concerned about, but there are some that, there is a chance that if you've spent it, uploaded your receipts, they've accepted that, they've given you the money, you're not going to get clawed back.
Okay. I have another interesting one. So, of course, we already know that that round of NEA offers that went out to this person, or this person's organization got one. But do you have any insights into what led to offers to orgs and projects whose grants were previously terminated? So, just for clarification, she put a clarifier. Thank you, Polly. To be clear, we had our FY 2025 grant terminated in May, and then got an offer for FY 2026 this past week for the same program that was previously terminated. So do we know how that could have happened?
It could be a slightly different project, but for the termination, I know, the NEA wanted to just kind of clean up a lot of pre-existing grants where folks had not completed their paperwork, uploaded their receipts, their final reports, and they wanted to get them cleaned up, because the compliance requirements of that grant were different than the compliance requirements of this grant. So that termination was merely to speed up you completing that grant.
Oh.
And now with this offer, you are receiving new compliance requirements. And it's up to you to decide if they believe that your proposal for the project fits their requirements of what they want. But now this is just a compliance to say, will you adhere to it for the full project period?
Okay. Well, I hope that helped, Polly. That is super confusing, but I think Nina answered that pretty clearly, and that'll be up to you. So thank you, Nina. And then, do you have any information on how local arts agencies fared in the most recent round of NEA grant offers? I know of one LAA that was declined, and I'm curious about whether other LAAs received funding recommendations or not. I know that there was a big push to make sure that as many LAAs kept their funding as possible. So can you speak to that as well?
Yes. Local arts agencies got bundled up with other governmental agencies to be protected for their funding, even though there's not a statutory formula for local arts agencies. But those that had applied, as long as it did not fall outside those projects that were specifically not fundable. An example would be if the entire project was about DEI, and we now know that there is no project at the NEA that can be funded on DEI related issues. There is some more clarity about that I can get into in a moment. But if that local arts, and I believe that there was one or two where the local arts agency under the previous Biden administration, where it was completely recommended that you did do these kinds of DEI projects. If you fell into one of those categories, yeah, those there were only a couple of those, but they ended up being denied because the NEA was not allowing organizations to rewrite what they would use the money for. It was either what their original proposal was for or not at all.
Okay, I have two left. So, someone said, I'm also curious if anyone knows background on why the NEA is not offering panel feedback this round. Is that correct?
Actually, I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know if that is actually a change in policy.
Okay, we will find out. Person who put that question. Thank you. And then just last one, it says, if my organization submitted to NEA a gap 1 and believes we already align with the new priorities but didn't know how to emphasize the priorities that we describe later, should we withdraw gap 1 application and apply to gap 2, re-emphasizing those priorities?
So I would recommend contacting the grants officer or grants@arts.gov, that email address, and posing that question and let the grants officer help recommend an answer to you.
Okay. All right, I know there are some other questions in the chat. So if you still have questions for us, you can email me, mfernari@artsusa.org, and we can, we might not be able to get to you right away, but I want to still be able to answer those really important questions. So thank you all so much. And thank you, Nina, for answering those questions over time. I am going to do a very rapid fire advocacy point here. So thank you all who have stuck around. And of course, this is being recorded. So if you've got to go, I understand, and you can always check back with us later. But if those slides can come up, thank you so much. All right, let's go towards the end. Okay, so how are we taking action? So right now is the August congressional recess, like we'd mentioned before, where members of Congress are back in district and back in their states. So we really recommend that during this month, you are trying to get in district meetings. We have loads of resources for you in terms of tools and briefs and all these things that we just used for our legislative fly-ins. So those are accessible to you along with other toolkits, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then also invite your members of Congress to your arts events and organizations. It's a great way to showcase what you are doing actively. There's such a different mindset for some people where they don't truly understand something unless they're living it, right? That kind of element of empathy. And we know we all have it in the arts. We have this love and we want to share it. So invite them, have them see where those dollars are directly impacting. Also, protect the NEA toolkit. So this is an amazing toolkit that AFTA has created. Our communications team has created talking points, sample letters, messaging templates, and social media graphics. And there are also 2 calls to action, which we have recently updated so that you can still use to reach out to your members of Congress. This toolkit is so vital, and I think it'll be really a great resource for you to then use in those in-district meetings, along with those fly-in resources that we just used and over the past 2 weeks, which has different briefs and charts and things like that. And of course, we're mobilizing arts advocates nationwide. So using that call to action at the perfect time when pressure is needed. This is just a great moment to be happy that we got that number in that Senate bill, but we need to keep pushing so that when it goes to conference, we keep that number at $207 million level funding, right? So we want to keep that pressure on, but having those in-district meetings and inviting your members of Congress to come to your arts organizations and arts events, I think that is extremely vital right now during this period of time. We can go to the next slide. All right. So again, what are you doing right now? Download that toolkit. I know that Camille is putting it in the chat, using your fly-in briefs as resources for yourself, but also for your communities. We want everyone to get involved. Anybody can invite their member of Congress to an event, and we want to make sure that they're equipped as well. So if you have an organization that regularly sends out updates, we'd love for you to share those. And then, like I said, inviting your members of Congress, having in-district meetings, and then speaking up on social media. We briefly talked about this with our fly-in advocates, but your stories combined with that amazing data, either from AEP6 or the creative economy profiles from the BEA, Bureau of Economic Analysis, those are great ways to make sure that your story is amplified and has impact. I always love to quote our Senior Vice President of Research, Randy Cohen, you can't have a story without the data and no data without a story. So you always want to make sure those go hand in hand. And I'm going really quickly, but finally, you will find all of the resources and the recording of this webinar on this page. So artsactionfund.org/office hours. If you go to that page, you'll be able to watch this back in just a couple of days. I'll have it up. And then we'll also make sure all the resources that we discussed today are also linked there. Thank you all so much for joining us and staying over today. We were jam-packed with incredible information, so I'm so grateful to our advocates, to our staff speakers. This was absolutely wonderful, and I hope everyone felt the same way. And when you have that recording up, please share it with your networks. We want to make sure that this information is accessible as far and wide as possible. ASL will be located at the top left-hand corner of the recording as well. So we want to make sure everyone knows that. Thank you all so much. Have a great weekend and goodbye.